In today's video, I'm going to show you exactly how to tune your edges as well as wax your board, and you're going to notice in the chapter markers down below that this video is split into two parts so that you can easily find what you're looking for, as well as come back to this video so you can get a refresher or finish watching the whole entire video. So on that note, let's get started. I'm a massive fan of getting my board tuned by a machine. I find that to be like pretty nice. You're definitely gonna get some shops that do a very awesome job and some shops do a terrible job. And I know this from experience because I've had a brand new board brought into a shop and became completely rounded and dull when I asked for it to be sharp. So you may have to do your own research in finding a good shop, but I like to bring my board into the shop to get it tuned. Now, obviously it's a brand new board. We'll talk about that here in a little bit, but for now, if your board, such as mine, has probably about 80 days on this board, I will get this thing tuned at a shop and then I can maintain it with the equipment that we're gonna dive into today. And if you're interested in picking up any of these awesome goggles, check out shopbenetek.com. These are on sale right now. They are magnetic lenses and every single goggle comes with 2 lenses, so you can't go wrong. Before we get into the actual edging part, I wanted to discuss how I set up my edges. Now, I'm a big fan of having the sharpest edge that I can so that I can ride the half pipe, really steep terrain, icy terrain, jumps, but then I also want to be able to ride some rails. So I like having a 2-degree base bevel. Essentially, that means that I'm flaring out the base edge 2 degrees, and then let's say that I'm hitting a rail. Well, I'm actually having 2 degrees of separation from that really sharp point. What's beneficial of that is you get the perks of having a super sharp edge, but then you're less likely to catch on a rail. Now, if I was perfectly 90 degrees and 90 degrees and I happen to hit a rail, well, there may be a lot of friction created on that edge, whatever's downhill, and you may end up crashing and literally not the sickest thing ever. So when I go to a shop with a brand new board, I will ask for a 2-degree base bevel and match it with a 2-degree sidewall edge angle as well. So my kind of rule of thumb, if they don't really know what a 2-2 is, find a different shop. Some people do a good job, some people don't. Again, you're gonna have to discover that on your own. Once my board is at a 2 and 2, then I can just maintain it. Let's dive into some of the equipment that I have here. Yes, you can use that generic edge sharpener. That definitely works, but it's not as precise or not as ideal. What I have here is a 3-piece setup. So we'll zoom in. Essentially, I have a file guide, I have an edge, and then I have a clamp to hold it all together to make sure that I'm keeping this angle. Now, these file guides are pretty cheap. I'll link everything down below, but these file guides pretty cheap, and then you can get different files. Now, I do have quite a few different files. I have a very aggressive file. As you can see the teeth here, this thing is like super aggressive. This is great for initiating that first edge, or if I need to change it from 90 degrees to that 2-degree edge, then yes, I could use this. I don't use it much because I have a shop do it. And then you have like a mid-fine tooth that's gonna scrape away a lot of stuff as well, but not as much. And then you got your fine edge. So the goal is to have a nice sharp edge, but nice and smooth as well. So I do have 3 different files here. Now, again, I do have this I do have this file guide. This thing's super cheap and you can get them in 1 degree, 3 degree, or 2 degrees, but they're also going to be named like 88 degrees, 87. They're going to be labeled like that. So just know that. And then I just bought this at like Home Depot or something, where it's just a nice clamp. And the benefit of that is just like, as I move it around, that literally this thing is gonna stay together. This has been a super awesome investment, super cheap, but I also have the versatility of getting the different edges that I need to. Now, when it comes to actually edging our board, I do have these snowboard vices. These things are super awesome. Big shout out to Jeremy for hooking it up at summer camp. He 3D printed these, but you could definitely get these online. Again, I'll link it down below. So pop it in vertical. Now, the way I'm gonna hold this is try to get this part in the palm of my hand and then grip it. And so I have a nice contact, nice firm grip on this setup. And then this smooth part is going to be on the base of my snowboard. And then I like to go in thirds. So I'm gonna first focus on the first third, then the next third, and then that third. As multiple passes in the same place. So I'm focusing on this edge. Then I'll break this into halves. So I'll do a longer stroke so I can go more edge, a lot smoother. And then I will finish with the entire edge so that it's one smooth part. And then I'll show you in a minute how I determine if it's sharp or if there's any less sharp spots, but I'm gonna hold this and then I'm pulling towards myself. I'm not a big fan of pushing away. I like to pull towards me. So you may have to alter how you have the file set up to make sure that you're pulling. It's super easy. And then I'll start here and then nice and locked in. I am trying to put down pressure and pressure towards the board. So making sure it's nice and smooth. I'm not overdoing it. I'm not cranking into it nice and just, you know, moderate pressure. And then you're gonna feel as you pull towards you, there's a bit of resistance and you're gonna immediately know if the file's on the right way, because if the file just slides, it's the wrong direction. But if it actually gets a little bit of friction and you can feel it pulling a little bit of that edge off, that's what we're looking for. So I'm gonna do about 3 to 5 passes. That's 2, 3, maybe it's 4, 4, and 5. Another thing that you can do is get a permanent marker. This is a dry erase marker, so I wouldn't use this, but you can take a marker and draw on the edge, and then you're gonna be able to have a nice mark on the edge, and then you'll know exactly how much you've taken off, and have you taken off a equal amount throughout the edge. That's definitely a good hack. So then I'll go here and I'll do those passes, and then dry erase marker doesn't work, but you get the point. So now I know exactly where I was. I'm gonna continue on and do the next third. Then I'll do it in half board increments. And just to reiterate, I am not putting a lot of pressure down on the edge. If you have the right setup and the right file, it's gonna do a lot of work. Yes, you can put a little bit of pressure, but don't overdo it, because what ends up happening is really easy to put pressure and then you'll round out your edge and you'll completely blow it. You'll just completely do a bad job. So you want to be cautious of that as well. Now the goal is to do 5 passes from the very tip of the board to the very end of the board in one smooth motion. Now the big question is, how do you know if your edge is actually sharp or not? Well, one is you're going to see, if you had that marker, you're gonna see that I missed a spot here. Everything else looks good, this looks good, and this missed, right? That kind of thing. The other thing that you can do is take your nail and go at like a 45-degree angle, and you're gonna be able to feel or see how much of your nail is actually pulled off. And I would do this across the entire edge and just see where you are. You're gonna notice that you may have missed some spots. I noticed that this spot right here is a little bit less sharp than here with that kinesthetic feel. And for example, this spot right here, just doesn't feel as sharp. What I can do is focus and put a lot more energy into this side, and then I'll do full passes just to make sure it's nice and smooth and even. But that's just this side. There's this other piece of equipment that I have. Once again, I will link it down below. And this thing is a Swix tool that is for a base bevel. Now I find this thing to be extremely useful for maintaining edges. I've kind of struggled to set an edge, so I would use this more as a maintenance tool. But what you can do is that there is like this, and as you can see here, there's like different degrees. So I can set my base bevel to different stuff. And then like right here, I have it set to 2 degrees, but I can have all these increments in between. Then all I gotta do is set my file up appropriately. I'm gonna slide it in. I'm gonna loosen this, make sure the guide slides in, and then I can turn it, get it locked in there, and then I have a nice file guide. Now, once this is all set up, you're gonna wanna make sure that the adjustment is to the center of the board and that these metal feet things are going to be on the edge. And then it's going to naturally tilt the edge just a little bit, as you can see here. And I'm gonna do this just so you can see it, but I would obviously make sure this is nice and flat. Getting my hand to grip nicely on it, I'm putting my thumb and adding a little pressure this way to making sure that it just sits on the board nicely. Then I'm gonna pull back and do that same third increment. So 1, 2, 3, then I'll split the board in half, and then I'll do the full passes. And that's exactly how you use this tool. Now, I'm not gonna do it in this video, but I would go back through to a nice, fine, smooth file so that you can do both the base bevel and the other edge and make it nice and smooth, so you have like the most amazing edges. But we're gonna save that for you to do, because we're gonna move on in this video. You may be asking, why am I rounding out my edges? Well, I like to do this thing called detuning my contact points. That essentially means that I'm gonna take my snowboard, I'm gonna place it on a flat surface, and I'm gonna find the exact last place that their board is contacting the ground. So for me, it's right about here. Then I will take a marker or a file and just make a little bit of mark right there. Now, I do this because as you're turning your snowboard, you have this rounded part. Well, in soft snow, that rounded part of the nose is gonna start to dig in the snow, and it's going to dig more than you want. So then all of a sudden it's flexing the board, it's gripping and ripping, and all of a sudden you're in this situation called edge lock. You're literally on a toe side turn or heel side turn, and you cannot release the edge because you're locked in so much. It's because this part is too sharp. So what I'll do is I will find that contact point for all 4 points, which means I have 2 on my toe side edge, both the nose and tail, and then I have the heel side edge, nose and tail, and I'll find that point and I will round it out. I'll grab a file at a 45-degree angle, and I will take that point and round out from that point to the tip of the board, just like this. And what I'm really trying to do is make sure this is more rounded and smooth than this. So one way you can do that, like we learned earlier, take your fingernail, pull it against the edge, see where it grips. And then over here, I'm gonna notice that it's barely taking any fingernail off, and that's what we're looking for. So I highly recommend you detune your contact points after a fresh edge. And if you have a brand new snowboard, detune this as well. You will notice a night and day difference by doing this or not. Literally, most amazing thing ever. Now it's time to move on to waxing our snowboard. Now I'm a big fan of getting a specific waxing iron. I'm not a big fan of like the $5, $10 ones you might get at like a cheap store. The biggest problem is you might have a little like burr on your edge, and then because you have a $5 iron, it's gonna scratch the bottom of the iron, and now the iron is scratched, and then you scratch your base. And I know this because I've done this. So definitely don't do that. I would suggest getting an iron. The more expensive iron that you get, they're gonna have a little bit more benefits. For example, this one is gonna have a heating element that is actually gonna heat all the way to the edges instead of just an element in the center. A lot of the cheap ones, you'll notice that it's hot here, but it doesn't get hot everywhere. It's kind of annoying. And then also having just more temperature ranges is also pretty nice. So big fan of getting a nice iron. Now let's talk about buying wax real quick. I definitely recommend that you buy wax for the temperature range that you're gonna be riding in. So if it's negative 30 degrees, buy wax that's gonna be really good for that temperature, and then buy wax if it's springtime wax. But as a general rule of thumb, I would suggest waxing just slightly colder. Or if it's like, I don't know what the temperature is gonna be, make sure it's colder. If you have a really cold day and a really warm wax, you're literally gonna have the worst experience possible. You're not gonna move anywhere. So wax does matter, but make sure you're dialing in the wax. Then when it comes to melting your wax, a lot of the times when you buy wax, there's a melted suggested temperature, and then all you gotta do is just get the iron, dial it in. And there's a couple different waxes out there, and I have a 15% discount code for you at Pearl Wax, and I'll link everything down below. You just gotta use the code Tommy15 and you'll get 15% off every order if you want. And at the same time, you get to help support the channel. And their wax, they have a couple different levels of wax. They have their like recreational wax, which is gonna be bulk and super cheap and super awesome. And then they have more of a higher performance wax as well. I am not a big fan of just taking the wax and putting it on the iron and letting it drip everywhere for 2 big reasons. It makes an absolute mess, as well as you are not as conservative with wax, especially when you get into that higher performance wax. It becomes really expensive, so you want to be more sparing. Plus at the end, you don't have as much to scrape off. So what I like to use is the crayon method. Essentially, you're going to take your wax, you're going to tap the iron, and then you're going to immediately take the melted wax and then drag it on like this, like a crayon. So you're gonna tap and drag. And my goal is to try to cover up as much of the board as possible. Now again, I'm not trying to overdo it, but you make sure that you're getting enough wax on the edge, because that's where you end up using most of your wax is gonna be on edge. You're constantly on edge, or you're slowing down or going faster. So make sure you have wax there. And then you definitely have the option of going all the way to the tip and all the way to the tail. I usually don't, because I'm just a little bit more conservative with my wax, but you definitely have that option as well. So then I'm just gonna go back and forth. Notice how quick and effortless this is, just nice and smooth. I'm not spending a significant amount of time. And at times, yes, I'm definitely gonna get a little bit of dripping on the board, but you're gonna notice that I keep the iron in the center of the board, as well as I'm just managing where those drips go, and so that they don't just splash all over my sick benetek hoodie. I might release this if you think these are cool. I haven't decided yet. So making sure that I get the board nice and wax. Now, once the board is completely covered in wax and you're feeling pretty good, we are going to take the iron, place it down. Now, I don't want to put a lot of pressure on the iron. I just want the iron to have its own weight, essentially, and pull down. And then I'm going to smoothly just pull back. Now, I am looking for a speed that allows the wax to melt. Now, depending on which wax you get, there's different waxes may melt quicker or slower. And the wax that I have here, I have to go a little bit slower because the wax is pretty firm. So I go a little bit slower, but I'm looking for a nice medium pace. Obviously, I'm not just trying to do this. I'm also not as big of a fan of just sitting here doing circles. I like to have nice, smooth lines, making sure I cover everything and I can watch what has been covered, what is not. I noticed that I got a little bit of spot here. I can go back. I could even move the iron forward and backwards. I can farm a little bit of wax, making sure everything's getting nice and covered, but I am just trying to make sure that everything is smooth. And then the goal is just to make sure that I'm not keeping the iron in one spot for too long, because I'm not trying to burn my base or trying to ruin my board at all. So I'm definitely trying to keep it moving and grooving. Now, this board's a little bit beat up. I probably have about 80 days on it. So it definitely has some imperfections. So I got to put a little bit extra time into filling some of the other spots. And then let me know if you want to see another video on just repairing your board. That could be super fun, but let me know in the comments below. And also, if you're digging the content, like this video, because when you like the video, more snowboarders get to see it because it's in the algorithm. So definitely like the videos. It helps me, but it helps the snowboard community. And that's what we're here for. So let's keep on moving. And then I'm just going to keep going back and forth. Now, once you're done with getting the entire wax on your board, feeling pretty amazing and nice and smooth, one thing that you can do is take your board, shine it up to the light, and then you're gonna be able to see if you missed any spots, and then you can go back through and patch it up as needed. And then one thing that you're gonna wanna do is make sure your board cools down to about room temperature before you scrape. What I usually do is wax my board in the evening, and then I just scrape the next day in the parking lot. A lot of the waxes are biodegradable, so I don't have to worry about that, but I can do it in the parking lot. One thing that a lot of people make a mistake on is they'll buy a scraper, scrape, and then they throw it away because it's dull. One thing that you can do is get a edge sharpener. This is from our dudes at Pearl Wax, and essentially you have a Panzer file, kind of like the one the aggressive one earlier, and then you can just run this thing back and forth. And then what I do is like to run back and forth, turn it 180, run it again, and then flip it, do that again, and I'll probably actually go for like a lot longer. Flip and go again, and the goal is just to get nice smooth edges, but then it's nice and sharp. When you are scraping, I highly recommend that you're not angling like this and digging it into the actual board. What I would recommend is place the scraper in your hand and then put both thumbs down and then scrape at this angle, like this angle. So then what that's gonna do is pull the wax off, but you're not actually jamming the scraper into the edge. Now, you can use metal scraper, but it's not as recommended because it's really easy to make a mistake and slip and like ruin your base. This is really good for when you use P-Tex, which let me know if you want to see a repair video. So this one I never use unless I'm using P-Tex, but I'll use this thing just like this. Board's still hot, but I'm just gonna show you real quick. So just scrape like this, and then as long as it's nice and sharp, I'm not putting 1,000 pounds of pressure in, but enough pressure to get the wax off definitely helps a lot. And on that note, I hope you liked this video. Definitely comment down below what was your favorite part, and if I missed anything, let me know so I can make a version 2.0. And on that note, I appreciate you hanging out, vibing. Love you, appreciate you. See ya.